Sorry, we're just waiting for they're trying to record the share, waiting for it to start. It'll be another minute. Can't mention him? Okay, I'll try to. I don't know. that's the Okay, start. Okay, good evening, everybody. The shir tonight is based on a certain premise. And a lot of times, shirim are based on a premise, and chidushim are based on a certain premise. As a matter of fact, if you look sometimes throughout Rishonim, the Rishonim will say, the truth of the matter is that the first sugi in Shas, Maseches Brachos, the discussion is Me'emes HaKor Neshma Ba'arvin, and then all of a sudden they say the minhag is to recite Shema very early, and there's a whole discussion how you're Mekayim mitzvah Shema so early. So and various places you'll find Tosfos, other Rishonim say, well, we have to understand the halacha based on the minhag. Now, truth, sometimes there's something which is referred to as a minhag shtus, but in general, if Klal Yisrael does something, or a very strong percentage of Klal Yisrael does something, it has some validity to it. And the shir tonight is based on a certain premise. I would just say, I started developing this idea a few weeks ago. I give a shir to ladies on Sunday morning, and as I was giving the shir, an idea popped into my head, which I mentioned, and after I finished, I said, I have to give this shir Beit Avichai. I've been developing it since then. And the premise is based on the fact that at least amongst Ashkenazi ladies, that I would say are part of my tzibur. I don't mean my tzibur, my shul, I mean the wide tzibur. In general, I believe most of them are probably careful to daven Musaph. That's in general. Now, I say why Ashkenazi tzibur, because I actually think I saw amongst the Sephardim that a lot of Sephardi ladies will not daven Musaph. But amongst Ashkenazi tzibur, so many ladies are careful to daven Musaph, whether it's certainly on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, no question, Shabbos and Yontif, and I even think on Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh I couldn't know for sure, but if the house I grew up in and the house where I live now is any indication, so the ladies do daven Musaph. And as we'll see towards the second half of the shir, many Achronim seem to believe that also. The Beis Yitzchak and the Tzitz Eliezer and Yosef Shaul Natazin. That's what it seems that in general amongst the minhagis they daven Musaph. And really we have to understand why is that. Why? Now, before we understand why it is they daven Musaph, we have to understand, well, why shouldn't they daven Musaph? So I want to do a very quick review about Nashim and Tefillah, and then we can talk about Musaph. And the first part of the daf is mostly based on this idea, the first daf, about Nashim and Tefillah. So we know in general, the reason why everyone knows ladies would not be obligated to daven is because davening, Tefillah, we would seem to be a mitzvah aseh shazman grama, a commandment that is time-oriented. In general, with some exceptions, ladies are paturos from any mitzvot that are time-oriented. One mitzvah that was an exception is, of course, making kiddush on Shabbos, and there are a number of eating matzah Pesach night. But when it comes to tefillah, the Mishnah says in Maseches Brachos clearly, and Daf Chaf Manal Chaf Mabet, and that they are chayiv to daven. And the Gemara asks the question, why are they chayiv to daven? So he says because tefillah is rachamim. And this is actually the opinion of Tosfos, the Giras of Tosfos. If you look at source number 1, Daf Chaf Mabet, B'chayavim betefillah derachmininu, they're obligated to daven because it's rachamim. He says, Mao detema, what's the reason? He says, Hoil since uksiv be'er Erev avocher v'tzarayim, since by tefillah it's written that there are times to daven, the evening, the morning, the afternoon. You might think it's like Mitzvah Shezman Grama. So it says Kamashmal, no, it's not like Mitzvah Shezman Grama, and ladies are obligated to daven. So Rashi actually points out that tefillah is rachamim, and it's nothing to do with the fact that it says Shezman Grama. We have to go and rely on that because tefillah itself, Rashi says, is Rabbanan. But the Gemara clearly says that tefillah is rachamim because it's rachamim. So for that reason, ladies have to go ahead and ladies have to daven. Now, I'll just mention, before we move on to Musaph, that if you look at the Rambam, so the Rambam in Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, Halacha Bet, so the Rambam there says the mitzvah to daven once a day, mitzvah v'diraisa, mitzvah yispala b'chol yom shenemar, avadatem es Hashem Elokechem, and mipi hashmua, which means that it's passed down, handed down, that when it says v'avadatem, what is this? Is tefillah. Shenemar lo'avdo b'chol levavchem, and the Chachamim say, what is avodah shebelev? How do you serve HaKadosh Baruch in your heart? That's what tefillah. And amount of times you daven is not min Torah, and what you daven is also not min Torah, and tefillah has no set time. And because tefillah has no set time, so we say lefichach, and therefore that tefillah nashim v'avadim v'chayavim betefillah lefi shehi mitzvah asay shelo azman grama. So the Rambam says tefillah is mitzvah asay shelo azman grama. He says, and what is the elachiyah? For that reason, Rechayim. What is this mitzvah? This mitzvah is a person. Well, we'll come back to the second part of the Rambam. So if you look at source number 7, the Rav, my uncle, it's my uncle. So he goes ahead and he asks the question: what do you mean tefillah has man grama? Tefillah is very much has man grama. There's man tefillah. There's man tefillah, and since there's man tefillah, so obviously that means that it's a mitzvah shez man grama. So the Rav points out that really, as the Rav is known for, he says when we look at a mitzvah, so the mitzvahs are always divided into, not always, many times we can divide the mitzvahs into two parts. There's the chiyuv mitzvah, the ma'isa mitzvah, what you have to do, and there's the kiyum. In other words, the mitzvah has to go ahead and it has to do something to you. There's a kiyum. So the ma'isa mitzvah of most mitzvahs, it's the ma'isa and the kiyum, you get at the same time. He says, however, when it comes to tefillah, what's the kiyum of tefillah? The kiyum of tefillah, the ma'isa mitzvah of tefillah is to go ahead and to daven, to express something. But the kiyum of tefillah is to feel something in your heart. See, even though the chiyuv of tefillah is at certain set times, however, the chiyuv is at certain set times, the kiyum, feeling in your heart, it's a whole day. A person has to feel the avodah in his heart a whole day. So that's the reason why it's considered mitzvah say she'ein azman grama, even though there definitely is zman tefillah. However, the idea of thinking in your heart, of having avodah in your heart, it's really a kiyum which happens a whole day. Now, so then the Shulchan Aruch paskins in source number 8, Siman Kavav, the Shulchan Aruch paskins that Nashim Vavadim, that even though they're patur from Kriya Shema, Siman Kavav Sifbet, they're chayav in tefillah. Why? Because he says, because tefillah is also mitzvah say shalo hazman grama. And I think source number 9 is very important. Source number 9 is the Mishnah Brura. And here the Mishnah Brura basically summarizes the Shitos Rishonim. And first he mentions the Rambam, and therefore according to the Rambam, he says that tefillah is a mitzvah d'oraisa once a day. It's a mitzvah d'oraisa once a day. So according to the Rambam, he points out that he says a person is able to daven once a day and there's no nusach, and for that reason a person is able, the Magen Avram points out that according to the Rambam, a person is able to daven and mekayim d'oraisa any way he wants. And he quotes, Mishnah Brura quotes the Magen Avram. So for this reason, women were not accustomed to daven tefillas yudches consistently. Why? Because when they get in the morning, they say a certain bakasha, they say a certain tefillah, they say moda ani. This is the Magen Avram. So I just have to point out, I'm not sure if it's my uncle or if it's Rav Chaim. I don't think it was Rav Moshe, but you never know. Rav Moshe, it was certainly handed down in some way. pointed out that they disagreed with the Magen Avram. They said, according to the Rambam, a person is not mekayim the mitzvah of tefillah midiraisa by going ahead and just saying one short tefillah. According to the Rambam, a person has to daven a regular tefillah. In other words, the nusach is not set by the Torah. But the Torah is very clear. You have to have a shevach, you have to praise HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bakasha, request, and you have to go ahead and you have to have odoy afterwards, which is nusach Shmon Esrei. So yes, midiraisa, a person can make up their own tefillah as long as it has shevach, bakasha, and hodah, and there's a nusach bracha which we don't make up on our own today. When the Magen Avram pointed out that ladies did not daven Shmon Esrei consistently, you have to remember in the Magen Avram's time the ladies were different than today. Why are they different than today? Not every lady was able to read Hebrew back in those days. They didn't go to school, and they didn't go to minyan, Tir Chazar Shashatz. They're busy. Unfortunately, they didn't have the opportunity to have the education that they have today. So for that reason, they have to rely on saying a short tefillah. However, today, of course, they have to daven. They have to say a regular nusach of Shmon Esrei. And then the Mishnah Berurah goes on. And the Mishnah was so according to the Rambam, but he said then he quotes the Ramban. And according to the Ramban says that the Ikar mitzvah of tefillah is the Rabbanon, and therefore once it's the Rabbanon, they said even though the whole mitzvah is the Rabbanon, and even though there is no, even if it's the Rabbanon, even though there's a zman for it, there's shachris and there's mincha according to the Ramban, which a lady has to daven according to the Ramban. He says still, since it's because of rachamim, so for that reason, a lady is able to go ahead and she has to, because of that, she has to daven both shachris and mincha. She has to daven shachris and mincha because ladies need rachamim also, and for that reason, according to the Ramban, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes it, every lady should be careful to daven shachris and mincha. I would point out that I think that that Reb Chaim actually held that different than the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah wants to say, according to the Rambam, you have to daven once a day. Reb Chaim wanted to say that actually you have to daven 3 times a day. Because Shmon Esrei 3 times a day, because he seems to put everything together, and even Ma'ariv. All right, but in general, I think the Olam accepts the sheet. What? But he says, but now that the men accepted, he holds women accepted it. And that's, I think, Reb Chaim's shita. The others will say that also, but in general, the Olam accepts the shita of the Ramban that women daven shachris and mincha. Okay, fine. So that's in regard to tefillah, and we see in regard to tefillah, the reason ladies are chayavos in tefillah is because it's rachamim, and everybody needs rachamim. So the question comes up in regard to Musaph. What's the story? What story in regard to Musaph? Are ladies chayavos in Musaph or not chayavos in Musaph? So we have to take notice and look at the Gemara in Meseches Brachos, Daf Lamed Aleph first, that deals with Musaph. So you look at source number 11, and I'll spend the rest of the shir on the rest of the Ma'amar Komos. So Rav Elazar ben Azariah Omer. Rav Elazar ben Azariah says, "Ein tfilas musafin ela b'chaver ir." So tfilas musafin is only b'chaver ir. Now, what does b'chaver ir mean? So the way the Gemara explains it is that you only daven musaf when there's with a tzibur. If a person, for whatever reason, is not davening with tzibur, there's no tzibur in the city, or he's not davening with tzibur, he's not chayiv to daven musaf, and maybe he's not even able to daven musaf. The Rambam discusses, is actually quite fascinating, what's this expression, chaver ir? Why not say elevet tzibur? Why do they say chaver ir? Why do they say chaver ir? So the Ram Parish Mishnah says like this. This is, when people wonder, he says, we speak about, everyone, their shul, they say, every shul needs a rav. What's the mucker? Every shul needs a rav. What's the mucker? Why not if you have, a bunch of Talmidei Chachamim? How come you can't go ahead and daven with that? What do you need a rav for? So there are various reasons. The Rambam says the reason why it's chaver ir is because in those days people had the custom of always davening with a chaver. And a chaver is a way of talking of someone who was a Talmid Chacham, right? So in other words, it seems this custom of davening with a Rav in the Shul is something which actually has a source that goes way back to the days of Chazal. That's why the Rambam says that's why it's called the Chaver Ir, because you want to daven near somebody who's a Chacham, and that's why the Chaver Ir, when they described the Tefillah B'Tzibur, it was described as Chaver Ir because it was always a Chaver that was there, which signifies someone who was a Talmud Chacham. So now, the Chachamim Omrim, Chachamim say, no. The Chaver Ir, V'Shalo B'Chaver Ir, you're able to daven with a Tzibur, and without a tzibur, whatever. And Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishmo, Kol Makom Sheyesh Sham Chaver Ir Yachav Pater Matilas Musaph. Rabbi Yehuda says like this. Rabbi Yehuda says that in other words, if there is a tzibur in the city davening, then this is a tzibur in the city davening, then a person can rely on the tzibur. If there's no tzibur in the city davening, so he has to go and he has to go ahead and he has to daven himself. Now, obviously, the reason why we're making exception that why would you say you only daven with a tzibur, and why would you say a yachid davens only that's daven by himself? There's no tzibur there. So we know Musaph is a tfilas hatzibur. However, that does not seem to be enough. So if you look at source number 12, and even though I have the Tosfos Yontif here, the also calls Rabbeinu Yonah, he says Ela b'chaver ir. So he says, why is it that you only daven b'chaver ir? So the Tosfos Yontif points out, he quotes the Rabbeinu Yonah, the Svirale, the Kevon she'ein ba'al shevach, all you have there is praise, all you're doing is praising HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and ein b'tachanunim, you're not asking for anything. It's not like a regular weekday Shmon Esrei, kamo b'yud ches, like in Shmon Esrei, v'gam ein onu mispalo sekeneged tfilas tachanunim shalchol. He says, and even though we're not davening it corresponding to a regular tefillah of chol, kemosh mispalo tfilas yotzer, tfilas mincha, dai shat shiva levad yispalo, so it's enough that it's shiva levad davens this Shmon Esrei. So what do we see? We see that Rabbeinu Yonah explains, and it's clear that tfilas Musaph is not a tefillah of tachanunim. And therefore, if it's not a tefillah of tachanunim, so the question is, it's not for rachamim, so maybe because of that reason, ladies should not be mechuyavos to daven Musaph, because tefillah is only, in general, we go ahead and we say that tefillah is only for rachamim. Now, I would just point out, it's not in the daf, there's another sugya which relates to this. And that sugya is concerning the issue about tashlumim for Musaph. What does that mean? That means that we know if someone misses a tefillah, he can go ahead and make up the tefillah. The one tefillah he can't make up is Musaph. One tefillah he can't make up is Musaph. And the two reasons that are given. One reason that's given is because tefillah Musaph is totally a makom korban, and we know you can't have tashlum in a korban. And number two, also the other reason is that Musaph, when you make a korban, Rabbeinu Yonah points out that it's not really the same idea. We're not asking for rachamim. So there's really no point making the tefillah only when you're asking for rachamim. Now, this idea that Musaph is different every tefillah because Musaph is v'gachim korban, I once heard from my father another nafkamina. The nafkamina goes like this. It says that, let's say, for example, we're supposed to daven mincha before shkia. What happens if shkia comes? Can you still daven mincha? Like you still daven mincha? Chassidim do it, and I'll tell you the truth. I saw my father do it sometimes also. He's after shkia, he daven. Okay, why? Because he says if the tefillah is only because of korban, then you're right, you can't do it. But if tefillah is because of rachamim, so it's still the daytime. He says, and he said at that time, he said it's obvious in general if someone didn't daven Musaph yet, the halacha is you're supposed to daven mincha before Musaph because tadir v'sheino tadir, whatever comes first. You do whatever comes is done more often. You do first, but he says obviously if you're going to go ahead and you're going to end up davening Musaph after shkia, better daven mincha first and then do mincha after shkia. And then he said in Shir, and I don't know where the source is from. He says, and even according to Rabbeinu Tam, and Rabbeinu Tam, when does the day end? It ends quite later, 50 minutes after shkia. Even according to Rabbeinu Tam, you're not allowed to daven Musaph after shkia. Why? Because at actual sunset, that was the end of the day of the Beis HaMikdash. So Musaph has the aspect of korban. And also, Musaph is not really a bakashas rachmim. So Rabbeinu Yonah, the Beis Yosef quotes it. Rabbeinu Yonah says, based on the Chavav, Maseches Brachos, he asked the question, what do you mean there's no Rachamim? There's definitely Rachamim in Musaph. What are we asking for in Musaph? We're asking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring back the Beis HaMikdash, to master the Korbanos to its place. And as a matter of fact, I thought about this today. Someone once asked me in the shul, it's fascinating. We daven 3 times a day. And the tefillah is of Macham Korbanos. All right? And in the middle of Shemona Esrei, we have all bakashas. So the first set of bakashas are more personal. And the last set of bakashos that we ask the HaKadosh Baruch Hu for is more, we're thinking about the future of Klal Yisrael. We ask for a better system of courts. We ask the HaKadosh Baruch Hu to take care of the Rishayim, to bring Mashiach, right? In the bakashas itself, do we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring the Korbanos? We ask, where does it come? It comes up from Ritzei. That's just Ritzei. So someone asked, why is it that we don't mention Korbanos until Ritzei? Like, that should be the most basic request. So I thought about it, and the Rabbeinu Yonah, on this question, as far as Musaph having a bakasha, he says, yes, it has a bakasha. But the ikar of Musaph is not a bakasha. The ikar of Musaph is talking about the Korban Musaph. Now, it could be that they wanted the essence of Shemona Esrei on a regular day to be a tefillas rachamim, and not to be confused that it's really the Macham Korban. In other words, it was enacted because of the Korbanos, but it's not the Macham Korban. It was enacted because of the Korbanos. For that reason, we don't really mention the bakashas. However, Musaph itself is an act of Macham Korban, and for that reason, there shouldn't be tashlumim. And also, as we said, Musaph is in its essence not a bakashas rachamim, but Rabbeinu Yonah says even though there is one bakasha, I will come back to Rabbeinu Yonah, hopefully towards the end of this year. So how do we paskin? So if we look, you see in the Shulchan Aruch says that kol yachid v'yachid chayav lispal filas Musaf is sefafim ben yesh tivir ein lo. Every yachid has to daven Musaf. Okay, and then the shliach tzibur does chazar shashatz. Now, if you look, the first source is on this issue is source number 14. This is the Chuvas Rabbi Kiva Eger, and Rabbi Kiva Eger mentions this shaila about whether a woman has to daven Musaf parenthetically. What's the shaila he has? I don't have the whole tshuva here. But the shaila he was asked is what happens if a person can only afford, has to do a certain mitzvah, and the mitzvah is either he has to do tefillin, or sukkah, or lulav, right? Or another mitzvah. And he points out that he believes the mitzvah of tefillin, a person should buy the tefillin. And one of the cheshbonos people make is they say, maybe tefillin is less important because tefillin is something that only males do. Okay, even though a woman is not mechuyeves to sit in the sukkah and not to take arvina, she could do it. But maybe we should be more machmir by a mitzvah that everyone can do. And Rabbi Kiva Eger says he doesn't like that because you look at source number 14. He says. Gam lo matzinu the asay sheshava b'chol kodem l'asay she'en shava b'chol. Rabbi Eger says we don't see such a concept that an asay which everyone does is more chomer than asay not everyone does. He says, and what's an example he gives? Brachos, we say ha'lefan of shnei tefillos. If someone has 2 tefillos to do, mincha and musaf, to daven mincha and daven musaf, mincha hikadem. So we know mincha comes first because it's tadir, because it comes more often. But the question is, maybe you should daven Musaf first. Why? Maybe you should daven Mincha first. See, Mincha Musaf. So we have to have Mincha first. And what's the reason? Because Mincha is more tadir. So you can give a different reason. What's the reason? Because if ladies and men daven Mincha, so maybe Mincha should be more chamor. So he says the Gemara does not give that reason. So the fact the Gemara has got the reason we see just because more people do it does not make the mitzvah more chavar. The low naked time the mincha shav b'chol nashim chayav b'tefila of musaf ein shav b'chol. So he says musaf we say is not more chamer So we say mincha is more chamer because it's more tadir, not because it's shava v'chol. But he says Musaph is not shava v'chol. It means not everyone is chayiv to daven Musaph. Women are not chayav to daven Musaph. That's Rabbi Akiva Eiger. So now, if you look, other achronim definitely argue. I want to skip number 15 for now. I'll come back to number 15. Number 16 is the Beis Yitzchak, Rav Yitzchak Yeshua Shmelkes. So he actually had a very interesting shaila. And his shaila was like this. It seems that in his day, there were people, Hasidim referred to them, I think it meant people who were very zahir in mitzvos, that they would get up in the morning, and the first thing they would do, when they got up, I guess, they washed Negavasser, they said Birchas Torah, and the first thing they would do is they would say Kriya Shema. They would say Kriya Shema. First thing they would do. Why? Because they were afraid that they're going to miss man Kriya Shema. They were afraid of many things. And people jumped all over them because they say, how can you say Kriya Shema first thing in the morning? Before you say Kriya Shema, what do you have to do? Before you say Kriya Shema, you have to do what? Put on tefillin. So what happened was they wanted to suggest that no, he says Kriya Shema is more important than tefillin. Why? Because Kriya Shema is something that everyone goes ahead and everyone does, as opposed to tefillin. All right. So then at the end, I'm sorry. So he says. So at the end and at the end he goes. He actually. So what happens is at the end he defended that and he says, yeah. The reason why they do Kriya Shema is because maybe Kriya Shema is more important than tefillin, because Kriya Shema is something everyone else does. And he defends them. So he says, never questions Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Why? Because Rabbi Akiva Eiger says no. In other words, according to the Beis Yitzchak, he says something everyone does is more chomer than something not everyone does. So, and Rabbi Akiva Eiger disagrees. And Rabbi Akiva Eiger says, how do we know that? Because we see that everyone davens mincha, not everyone does musaf. And we don't see that Chazal say that difference, that mincha is more chomer because not everyone davens musaf. So he says it's not true. Ladies are mechuyavas to daven musaf also. That's just ladies are also mechuyavas to daven musaf. So the reason Chazal did not say mincha is more chomer than musaf because more people are mechuyav to daven musaf mincha is because it's not true. Everyone is mechuyav to daven musaf also, and that's what he says. He says the reason why there's no tashlumim for musaf is not because it's not rachamim. He says aval ikar tam, source number 16, kevan shuba makom korbanos, since musaf is instead of korbanos, avers matal batal v'korbanos, but avers matal batal v'korbanos. Aval ikar musaf have it feel the rachamim. He points out musaf is a feel of rachamim, v'noshim chayavos, and noshim are chayavos. And he says, and what is the rachamim? He says, amnam. Mashakasav Hagon Rabbi Akiva Eiger, the Nashim loyal hem chelav Korbanos tzibur, that women did not have a chelav Korbanos tzibur. Is that tamoy? It's very strange. The imkain, because if you're going to say that, so where does Rabbi Akiva Eiger get this from? That women did not have an obligation to bring Korbanos tzibur. Where did he get that from? So how do we pay for the Korbanos tzibur? Chatz shekel. So he says, ladies didn't go ahead and give machzor shekel, so therefore they're not chayiv to daven musaf. So the Beis Yitzchak says, if that's the case, kohanim also are not chayiv to daven musaf. Why? Because they also didn't give machzor shekel. So for that reason, he says no. Women have an obligation to daven because it is a tefillah of rachamim, and they have a chelik in the korbanos tzibur, and certainly he says they have to daven because musaf brings kapara for certain chatayim, tumas mikdash, going into the mikdash when you're tamei, and certainly Yom Kippurim. So he says, of course, they have daven because it's rachamim. So I'm going to come back to the Beis Yitzchak, but I want to do first source number 17, and then we'll come back and discuss 16 and 15. And source number 17 is Rav Yosef Shaul's Natazon, and he says like this. He says there's another reason why it's daven musaf. And what's the reason? He says we do things today, and when we do things, we're doing that because of Kedushas Hayom. What does that mean? In other words, the Kedushas Hayom demands that we do certain things. The Gemara Maseches Zvachim asks the question: what happens if you have a shaila to do something which is more tadir, comes more often in the Beis HaMikdash, and something is more holy, more kadosh? What comes first? Kadosh, Mekudash, or tadir? And the Gemara says, the Gemara here brings a raya from from Musaph. That what? That really Musaph, in a certain sense, is more kadosh, but mincha is more tadir. Why? Because Musaph is based on the kedushas hayom. So in other words, Yosef Shaul Natazin explains that a lot of times we do things for the kedushas hayom to express the kedushas hayom, and everyone has to do it. And therefore, since Shabbos comes and Yom Tov comes and Rosh Hashanah or Chodesh comes, there's a certain kedushas hayom. So the Musaf is what brings on the kedushas hayom, and everyone's responsible to do that. Just like when it comes to Shabbos, everyone's responsible when they kiddush to express kedushas hayom. So we also express it through davening Musaf. When we daven Musaf, we're sort of creating kedushas hayom. Klal Yisrael is creating kedushas hayom when we daven Musaf. It's the kedushas hayom, the kedushas hayom, the holiness of the day obligates us to go ahead and to daven Musaf. All right, so that's another reason why I have to daven Musaf. But what I want to spend time on is the Beis Yitzchak, which I mentioned before, and really to bring home why it is I think today that ladies do daven Musaf and why it's so important they daven Musaf. So if you look at source number 15, source number 15 raises the point like this. Musaf is definitely a korban tzibur. Musaf is definitely a korban which comes from the money of the tzibur. The tzibur are people who have given money for the Korbanot in the Beis HaMikdash. And the Torah even raises the problem that if you go and look, the Torah says who gives machzor shekel. How old do you have to be? 20 years old and up. So the Torah even says the machlokes. So giving machzor shekels, that's something that starts from age 20, which by the way would be definitely an exception. One of the rare mitzvahs that a man does not have to do at the age of 13. Probably, I'm thinking in my mind, the only other mitzvah a man does not do at age 13 probably is getting married. Okay, he's supposed to wait till he's 17, 18 years old. He doesn't have to do it when he's 13 years old. Or is it something? No, they are mechuyev to go ahead and to give machzor shekel from the age of 13. So if you look at source number 15, the Ramban, the Torah Mima quotes the Ramban, that he says the obligation to give machzor shekel begins from the age of 13 years old, like all mitzvahs of the Torah. All right, all mitzvahs of the Torah. He says, oh, but what the pasuk says only from age 20. She says, listen, he says, there are two types of machzor shekel. There's one machzor shekel which is given every year. That's a machzor shekel every male from the age of 13 and up have to give. And then there's the second machzor shekel, which was given special at the time of the Mishkan to build the Adonim. That was only for those who are 20 years old and up. So therefore, when the pasuk says 20 years old and up, that was talking about the special one-time machzor shekel. But in general, of course, from the age of 13, you have to go ahead and you have to give machzor shekel. However, quotes in the third line, this is in Parshas Kisisa, the Rav, the Chinuch, the Rokeach, the Gra, they hold that the chiyuv to give machzor shekel starts at 20 years old. La'olam, even in time of the Beis HaMikdash, from 20 years old. So he says, and it's machlokas rishonim. What's the nafkamina in the machlokas? So he says like this. He says, he quotes the Besamim Rosh. Besamim Rosh, I didn't look it up, but it's, some people say the Rosh wrote it, maybe didn't write it, but Besamim Rosh said that Noshim are pturos from Tfilas Musafin. Why? Because since Musaf comes, Zeicher l'Korban Musaf, and since the Musaf was done from the Korban of machzor shekel, and since women are not mechayavos, obligated to give machzor shekel, for that reason, women are paturos from Musaf. So if that's the case, it sounds, according to Besamim Rosh, and Kiv Eger holds this way, that anyone who doesn't give machzor shekel is part of a Musaf. So if you're going to say that according to the Gra, if you're going to say according to the Chinuch, if you're going to say according to the Rokeach, that ladies are paturos and Musaf because they don't give machzor shekel, that means anyone who's not mechuyav to give machzor shekel is patur, and that means that any boy over age of 13 till 20 can't be a chazan for Musaf, because how can he be motzi the tzibur, right, when he's not chayiv? And that's the Torah even says. He says, Im kain ein liish pachti ben esrim lavor al ne'ateva betfilos musafim lotzis at tzibur, v'hu davar chidesh v'nifla ma'od, but Tzarech and Rab does not give an answer. Okay, and the truth of the matter is, in most kihilos, yes, people are allowed to go ahead and from the age of 13, they're allowed to daven. They are allowed to go ahead and to daven Musaph, and in Shabbos. And the truth is, we know Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur there's a Hakbara, but sometimes they'll send to a small community a yeshiva vacher to go daven for an amid. It's been done. So the question is, how do we understand it? That's the question of the Torah to me. Now I'll tell you just on the side. One of my cousins, who's a few years older than me, so his father passed away. He was a teenager, and he once walked into a certain shtibel to say Kaddish at night. He said, "What?" He said, he live in the Lower East Side. So Lower East Side and East Broadway used to have this whole line of shtiblach, and he walked in, and they said to him, "You can't daven for an amid, because here under the age of 20, no one davens for an amid." So he said to them. And he was probably correct. It's a minhag shtus, and he walked out and went somewhere else. Okay, but the fact of the matter is, he's a good kasha. How do we answer? How do we explain? How do we understand the kasha? So, so in order to understand the kasha, I would say like this. What explain the kasha to say is that even though it's very important to know that even though a boy from the age of 13 is not mechuyev to give machzor shekel, as we'll see. Is not mechuyev, or maybe he is. If you look at the Tzitz Eliezer, source number 18, source number 18 says like this: Rabbeinu Hagrozal, Tzitz Eliezer, Rosh V'Sham Migzos, Ulamashkin ein memashkin ad shei ben esrim. So what does the Gross say? The Gross does not say that a boy over the age of 13 is patur machzor shekel. The Gross says that a boy over the age of 13 is not chayiv to give. Is chayiv to give. However, the halach is we don't go into his property and take a lien if he doesn't give. That's in other words, in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, if someone would not give machzor shekel, they dealt with it. They wouldn't just say, okay, sort of like certain dues maybe. Okay, what can you do? In the days of the Beis Hamikdash, if someone that got machzor shekel, so Bezdin would be mashkin. They would go into his account. They would call it Tzalapoel. They would do something, right? They would do something. So the Gross says. They wouldn't go ahead and they wouldn't go ahead and take money from his account, but he definitely is chayiv. So he says like this. So what does it mean? He says Vehema says there are three categories. Pachas ben Yud Gimel the olav gam chiyuv aleka, v'rak im hevi mekabel mimena. Less than 13 years old, there's no chiyuv, but if he wants, he can give. He says, "Mi ben Yud Gimel ben Chaf the olav ika gam chiyuv," from 13 until 20 years old. So then, not only this if he wants, but he has a chiyuv to give. Barak, for whatever reason, they don't take out of his property against his will. His bank account if he doesn't give. Umi ben Chaf lamala the gam mashkinoso. So that's how we answer the kasha of Rabbi Yeager. They're definitely chayiv. However, if you look at source number 19. And this is the shita of the Rambam. So the Rambam points out like this: Hakol chayav min machzor shekel. Everyone is chayiv give machzor shekel. Kohanim, Levim, Yisraelim, V'gerim, V'avodim, Mishucharim. Everyone has to give. Avalo nashim lo avarim lo ketanim. V'im nasnu mekabel mehem. If they give, you accept. Aval hagoyim shnasnu machzor shekel. He's a guy who gives machzor shekel. He says, "Ein mekabel mehem." And then the Rambam goes on, and the Rambam says, "And a katan shehischil avev litein la machzor shekel, a katan whose fathers already started giving for him, gave him. He was 10 years old." He says, "Shuv eino posel linosan alav b'choshana b'shana sheyagdav itin la'atzmo." A katan who has started to give machzor shekel, the father can't pull back and say, "Okay, I gave for you 1 year or 2 years." No, the halacha is that the father has to keep giving. Once you start doing something, you have to do it. Okay, so now, I wanted to suggest, I thought of a certain idea, and to develop, and I think it's very relevant to us, that, as I said at the beginning of the shir, in general, as you see from so many of the later tshuvas, that it seems that they felt that ladies should daven Musaph, that even if they didn't daven Musaph 700 years ago in the days of Musaph and Rosh, ladies have accepted upon themselves to daven, right? By the Ashkenazim. And just like we say that in regard to Ma'ariv, so it was a reshus for men, But since we accepted it, now becomes a chiyuv. On some level, in certain kihilos, davening musaf has become, I don't like saying it's some obligation, but I believe that, yes, we would tell a lady she should daven musaf. And the question is, why is it so important? So, as I said, the Beis Yitzchak says that the reason for musaf is tefillah derachameh. Okay, why is it tefillah derachameh? So he says the reason why it's tefillah derachameh. He says he doesn't explain. He says he just tefillah derachameh, but he says at the end, and it's also because women need kapara. The musaf we daven on a regular day when musaf is required is because of tumas mikdash v'kadashav. And he says in Yom Kippurim they certainly get kapara. They say the vidui. But that's something in addition to the fact that musaf is tefillah derachameh. And what's the tefillah derachameh? What's the bigger rachamim in the fact that we're asking for the Beis HaMikdash? Right? It's the biggest rachamim in the world. It's the biggest rachamim in the world. And for that reason, that's something which is very important to the ladies also. And I want to go one more step. You know, there's a very, very beautiful story I heard from my father about the Netziv. Netziv, everyone knows, Netziv, ask someone to describe who was the Netziv. The Netziv was a Rosh Yeshiva Volozhin. He led Volozhin when it was at its height and its glory. The Netziv was a Rav. He was a Posek. He wrote so many Svarim, it's unbelievable. And Perish on Chumash, Perish on Shir Shirim, Perish on Haggadah, Shalos Teshuvas, the Perish on the Shiltis. Netziv also was a chazan. Okay? And my father told me that he davened musaf. He was a chazan, not in the yeshiva. He said in the shul in Volozhin. And he davened musaf every time there was a musaf. He was the Baal Musaf in his shul. And my father told me also that Netziv was a Baal Menagin. People know this. Which tune? And the tune that the Netziv made up is a tune that people, I think, still sing. I at least sing it today. Okay, and I'm not sure if it's a tune to Ata v'chartanu or Chasal Siddur Pesach. What he made love to, but you know, Ata v'chartanu mikol ha'amim Chasal Siddur Pesach ki hochaso. That comes from the Netziv. So the Netziv davened. My father said in a different context, Netziv, anytime he davened musaf, he would cry. He would cry. He says, except Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah he didn't cry because Rosh Hashanah, the Satan stands against Klal Yisrael and says, look, the Jews think they can sin a whole year and they can cry. So Rosh Hashanah he didn't cry. And the way my father described it, he said it like this. Maybe it was a little bit of an exaggeration. He said he used to cry so much, he said, there used to be a puddle. And the shamash would come over after davening of a shmata to clean it up. And he said, Musaf, he said, not one tear. Then someone asked my father the question, how can the Netziv cry? It's Shabbos, it's Yontif. So my father said, the Netziv didn't cry out of sadness. He cried tears of simcha, tears of joy. Because when he was davening Musaf, he saw the Beis HaMikdash standing. It's like he was able to experience it. And he was crying tears of joy. And I think the point of Musaf is to ask for the Beis HaMikdash and to go ahead and to experience it. And why is it important? Because unfortunately today, and I'm not sure for how long it was this way, there are so many people that it's not on their radar screen. They don't think about it. There's a very funny story about a certain Hasidic Rebbe. It could have been anyone that once was traveling through Europe. That's 150 years ago, and he stopped by a certain inn. And you know, they're very proud to have a Rebbe, simple people, to come to their inn. And in the middle of the night, he got up to say Tikkun Chatzos. And all of a sudden, you know, the innkeeper and his wife are sleeping in their room, and they hear the Rebbe crying. You know, so say his wife we'll call the innkeeper's name Yankel. The Rebbe's crying. Go check what's going on. Something's wrong. So he goes in the room and he sees this man sitting on a low stool crying. He says, Rebbe, what's the matter? He says, I'm saying Tikkun Chatzos. He says, Tikkun Chatzos? What's Tikkun Chatzos? He says, you know, I'm asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring the Mashiach, bring us to Eretz Yisrael, rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. He says, I don't know about that. I got to ask my wife. So he comes back. He says, my wife wants to know, what's the Mashiach going to do? Mashiach will take us to Eretz Yisrael. So he says, goes back. I just, my wife says, she says, no. She says, it's not a good idea. I says, why not? She says, it sounds funny, but unfortunately it's very true. We just spent so much time fixing the roof on this inn. How can we go to Eretz Yisrael? Okay, as it says, so the Rebbe felt very bad, because like a Jew should not want Mashiach. How can that be? So the Rebbe said, you know what's going to happen? The Mashiach will come and take us to Eretz Yisrael away from the Cossacks. So I'll ask my wife. So my wife wants to know, maybe the Mashiach can come and take the Cossacks to Eretz Yisrael, okay? So what is it? And by the way, this attitude, I have to tell you, this attitude still exists today. This is a story that happened to me. I spent many years in Chutz La'aretz during the summer. So all my Tisha B'Av paraphernalia was in the camp where I used to, because I used to speak a whole morning, Tisha B'Av morning. And the truth is, the only thing I left of value in the summer, in the camp at the summer, was my Sfarim on Kinos and my notes. The only thing of value. And then one year I had this idea, you know what? I'm not going back to camp. I should take my notes home with me. I took it home. Fortunately, I went back to camp the next year. Then I decided, you know what? I'm just leaving it here. And how do you know? That was my last year in camp. Okay? So I had a Talmud who was still in the camp, and I asked him maybe find my Kinos and my notes. He couldn't find it. All right, it's not the end of the world. It's only Kinos, right? But so I said, there is no way I'm going to spend money. I'm buying an art scroll, and I'm buying the Rav Sachs. I did that already. I might not be such a Baal B'tachon if I have some Emunah Mashiach. It's a true story. As I walked into a bookstore, and I saw that they were selling a paperback Musiph for like 30 shekel. So I said, you know what? I'm going to buy this Musiph for 30 shekel paperback. And while I was there, I noticed more than double the price was a hardcover Musiph. So I turned to the person next to me. He said to me, he knows who I am. He said, why would a person go ahead and spend double the money on a hardcover Kinos? And he looks at me and says to me, he says, I'm not like you. I know, you're always thinking about the Beis Mikdash and Mashiach. He says, I like what I'm doing now. I like them, Yom Tovim. He says, I like the davening and shul. He says, it's not something I think about. I'll get a hardcover Aginas. I couldn't believe my ears. I said, is this guy for real? I guess he is for real. He's telling me the truth. But unfortunately, a lot of people think this way. We need a lot of work to convince ourselves that we want to go ahead and we want to bring the Geula. So why do I mention this? So I gave a shir here once in this before about Af Ein Hayavos Sanes. That ladies are mechuyavos in the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, Arba Kosos, and the mechuyavos also in the mitzvah of Kriyas Megillah. Why? Because Af Ein Hayavos Sanes. So some say that they went ahead and they were a big part of the Nes. Yehudis by Chanukah, Esther by Purim. Okay? Some say it's because they benefited from the Nes. Okay? And what happened Pesach time? Pesach time, it's B'schus Noshim Tzidkanios Nigalu Mitzrayim. That's the parsha we're holding in. It's actually very relevant. Because the Noshim Tzidkanios, the righteous women, what did they do? So it says, when the men were ready to give up, they basically gave the men hope. They would meet them in the fields, they would wash them, give them to eat, and they would be intimate so they can have children and think about a future. You know what I mean? You know what they did? What they did is they pushed their husbands. And the truth is, if you look in the historical sources, Yehudis pushed her brothers. Okay? And the truth is, Esther, yes, Esther had played a big hand, but Esther pushed Mordechai. And Esther went ahead and pushed all the Jews. Some will lie, she pushed it, don't want to do. She says, if we want to aspire towards Geula, it seems that the ladies push the men. And if the point of Musaph is in order to inspire ourselves how important Musaph is, if the ladies aren't on the Musaph, we're in big trouble. And that's why, one of the reasons why ladies have to daven Musaph, because what's the point of Musaph? The Musaph, yes, is Rachamim. What's the Rachamim? Its bottom line is to ask for the Beis HaMikdash, But not just to ask, to realize how important, how beautiful it is. To be like the Netziv, to experience it. And if only the men are going to daven it, Musaph, we're going to miss out. For that reason, I believe that maybe that has become part, in a certain sense, at least of the Ashkenazi Masorah that I know, that ladies daven Musaph for that reason, in order that they can go ahead and they can be inspired to realize how important it is. And once they're inspired, they can inspire the men and to push the men. So just like all the other redemptions happen through them, so will this redemption. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Story about the lady with the